to Talk America.
Hey guys, this is Julie Golub with Team Smith & Wesson, and you're listening to the Armed Citizen Podcast.
From the Ghost Tactical Productions Studio, welcome to the Armed Citizen Podcast. And now your host, Trey Miller.
What is going on, my Ghost Squad? Welcome to the Armed Citizen Podcast live. This is a great episode 100, kind of a milestone for me. I didn't think that we would do 100 live streams, but we're still here. We haven't been kicked off yet, and for some reason, people keep showing up, so I don't know what the hell is going on, but welcome to the podcast. We are live, as always, on YouTube and simulcasting, as always, over on GunChannels.com. If you're not familiar with GunChannels.com by now, I mean, I don't even really know what to say to you. Come check us out. There's the link. It's a community formed by gun owners for gunners to have conversations, and tonight is going to be a conversation that you don't want to miss.
It's essentially Pornhub for guns.
Okay, hold on just a second. We have a lot of things that have happened in the last few days, and we have some things we need to discuss and talk about, and a lot of things have happened in the last 24 or 48 hours. So before we get going, let's say hello to the illustrious panel from diversityshoot.com and the host of the 2A for Everyone podcast. We got Tony Simon. What's up, Tony?
Hey, what's going on, man? Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I know you've got a podcast later on tonight, so we're glad to have you for as long as we got you for.
All right.
And from We the Female, a good friend of ours, Kerry Slone. What is going on, homegirl?
Just educating myself on all this stuff so that I can bring some knowledge to y'all. I've been busy. I've been doing a lot of homework the last few days on this.
Educating is a dangerous thing.
I know. Knowledge is they fear that, right? They don't want you to know what's going on.
That's right. And the founder of Walk the Talk America, the president, owner of Civility Arms, and the host of the Michael Sidney podcast, which is awesome. Go check it out. What's up, Mike?
How you doing? Thanks for having me in here tonight.
Yeah, man. You look like you're tired. You've been busy. I know you've been busy.
Oh, dude, it's nonstop. Like my phone, has been ringing. It starts at 6 in the morning and it goes all day. So
well, we're glad to have you, bud. And the tactical leprechaun himself from the great state of Texas. What's up, Clover?
What up? Good to be here.
Are you on the jet right now? Are you coming via private?
Yeah, I'm 30,000 feet, undisclosed location. Yeah.
Is that Air Force One or is that the G5?
Honestly, I don't know what it is. It's a picture from Google.
Well, we hope you have. Pincus might be showing up. If you guys checked him out, he was on CBS tonight, so he might be a little bit too big time for everybody out here. But no, they were talking on CBS about the shootings, and then we go into NRA, and apparently they interviewed Rob, and they only put about 4 seconds onto it. So I was a little. I mean, does it really surprise us, though? I mean, does it really surprise you? Put about 4 seconds on. So
he's really still like a B, C-list celeb. He's not quite A-list yet, right? Because they didn't give him a full 30 seconds. So
about 4 seconds, right? Yeah.
Well, I turned him down, so
that could be true as well. All right, so what we're going to talk about right now is obviously we had some horrific incidents that happened over the weekend. And our president came out yesterday and basically was saying that he is welcoming red flag laws, any bills that are going to be doing that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but more importantly, we're going to talk about what's next for the community. And the reason why I say that is it's been going on for a while. We've known for a while that our community is relatively fractured, especially on the social media side. We have a lot of just idiots out there yelling back and forth instead of listening to one another. They're trying to do this, that, and the other. But the problem that I'm having is now that we are susceptible to maybe some laws that could be relatively dangerous, and Kerry's going to bring us up to speed on one of them. But right now, what is next for us? I mean, should we be scared? Is a 2020 election now in play? Is gun control going to be a reality? These are all questions that we don't have the answer to, but we need to start having conversations. And some of us were talking before the show went live about how to have that conversation. And honestly, I don't know what the next step is, to be honest with you. I wish I did, but I think that a lot of it is we just have to listen to each other, and from both sides of the aisle and both sides of the gun, whether you're pro gun or anti-gun, listening to it, understanding what it is. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. And so I want to bring into you guys real quick. And I know, Tony, you might have to leave, so I want to bring you into it. We were having a great discussion beforehand, but the first question I want to throw out to the panel is this: with everything that's happened in the last 3 to 4 days, what's the next step? What is getting ready to happen? Do we have a kind of a climate feeler out there of what's getting ready to happen? Do you have one for your area, Tony?
Oh yeah, I got one. Hey, gun owners, it's time to fight. That's what's going to happen. That's what happened in Jersey, because they can't wait for something like this. They already have stuff on the books. We had a 10-round magazine ban that kicked in December 10th this year. And at the beginning of every year, they put on the 5-round magazine ban that's to come here in Jersey. So it just depends on how bad the situation is, if they push it or not. So yeah, Jersey gun owners, it's time to get off your butts and start getting those legislators phone calls and start writing those letters and actually be politically active. That thing you hate to talk about because it's not cool here, where it's not about a gun. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I want to bring Mike in real quick. And I don't know if I'm sure you did, and you've probably been talking with a lot of people in the last 24 hours or so since President Trump came out and said it was mental illness and mental health needs to be reevaluated, and he's welcoming red flag laws. From Walk and Talk America side, what's your last 48 hours been like?
It's been a lot of discussions with different states and different I'd say organizations that deal with either mental health or suicide prevention. For the most part, just kind of hey, did you see what he said? Or do you see that? I get a lot of that too, just from my in messages. One of the things, because I try to stay positive, him saying that is going to bring attention to the stuff that I've been doing for a year. I mean, the worst part about these tragedies is I've been here for over a year doing this work, and it's been crickets from the 2A community. And I don't even ask for money. So, I'm glad that people are starting to pay attention now, and those buzzwords like mental health or this and this and that. But I've been going at this. See, we could have been prepared to have shown the rest of the world that we do stuff if they would have got behind this a long time ago. So it's frustrating to me that it takes that. But maybe this something good will come out of it. They're starting to do some stuff in Baltimore, which I love, because that's the silver lining and all the crap that came out of that. Maybe some good stuff will come out of it in a positive way towards mental health. I get it. He's a little informed about, how this works with mental health, and the only predictor of future violence is previous violence, not mental health diagnosis. I can't say that enough. But at least we'll have some attention on it.
That's true. Clover, you've had some interesting comments being made by some leaders down in Texas over the last couple of days. And I know that Texas seems to be the area that people think is the most pro-gun, and it is extremely pro-gun, but it's not the most pro-gun that people think it is. And I know that you're far, far away from El Paso, but coming from Texas, you're probably hearing more locally than we probably are. Is there anything out there that they're talking locally as far as Texas now because of the El Paso shooting?
Not really, because we're in we only meet, our state legislature only meets every other year, and so we just adjourned, and so they don't meet for 2 years anyway. So what are they going to do? They can talk all the game for the
session or not.
Yeah, nah, I don't. They're not going to call a special session for anything, anything like that. Budgetary issue maybe, or something crazy, something that has to do with running the government or something like that. National emergency situation, something of that nature, maybe. But that's one of them things. I heard something today that it was in an interview somewhere, and somebody had made the claim, did not back up their facts, and of course I didn't have time and haven't went and fact checked this, but they didn't back up their claim, but claim that, you know, in the last fiscal year or whatever, there's been 250 mass shootings, mass murders, basically. And I'm wondering where they're getting those stats, because we've heard of 6 or something. So there's a big discrepancy there between 250 happened and there being 6 or maybe 8 or something in the news cycle. And why are they publicizing the crap out of some and not the others, if that's the case? Yeah, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of, from the media, there's a lot of wanting to stoke stuff from politicians. You have certain politicians that are asking questions, and I worry about them because seemingly some of them you can trust, and I don't know that them being a politician. I think just about anybody that wants to run for political office, I think you need to start questioning them on that day exactly, you know, where they stand, let alone once they get in, because I think once they get into that political office, I think that corruption starts to set in and things like that. But as far as on the ground here in Texas, I don't think there's certainly not a sentiment that's calling for or an overwhelming sentiment that's calling for any type of gun control or anything like that. If anything else, it's the opposite. You know, they're making the claim that, you know, look at Texas documents pretty well self-defense, use of a firearm in self-defense. And so, you know, look at how many times that happens here in Texas a year. Could this have been one of those situations where it could have been completely eliminated, at least casualties mitigated? I mean, when you're talking about how El Paso, that was a, you know, one life is too many lives, but El Paso was certainly a high casualty count. Could you have mitigated that to 2? Yeah, I mean, I think that potentially you could have, if we weren't dealing with these silly, you know, gun-free zones and things like that in a state that is, as you said before, not the most gun-friendly, but certainly more open than most.
So on that note of the mass shootings and what they're classifying as mass shootings, so earlier this year, I've not looked the second half of the year, you know, probably the last 3 or 4 months, but I know that there was some rhetoric that was coming out initially at the first of the year, you know, through March, I think it was, about mass shootings and how we'd had so many mass shootings. And so I went in and started doing a little bit of homework on that and found that, so where that is coming from is actually from Everytown is where that's coming from. And what they're classifying as shootings aren't it's really not what it is. And so, or school shootings, that's another big one too, is the school shooting thing, right? And this is just an example. I don't have it pulled up. I can't pull it up, but an example of one of these school shootings was a cop who shot his firearm misfired while teaching a class. And another one was they shot a suspect who was running for them outside of the school, in front of the school. So that's where some of those statistics are kind of getting skewed from a little bit. So I know that that's coming in. I mean, obviously 250 is a little high. And then, you know, there's some of them that we're not hearing about anymore because they didn't meet their, you know, their narrative, right? So there's that. Yeah, it's the classification that they're using and the where they're getting those numbers from. The source is, I mean, this isn't going to surprise anybody. It's a biased source where they're pulling that information from. So,
well, one of the things that happened in New Jersey a year ago, almost a year ago, when they just signed this latest legislation in, was Father's Day shooting. 21 people were shot in Trenton, New Jersey at Art All Night. There was an inmate who got out of prison in February for murder, did 14 years. He went to Art All Night, which was an art festival that takes place, as the name says, all night. And it had police outside and police inside. He walked in and shot at gang members inside. He ended up wounding 21 people. And then he tried to run. And of course, the cops eventually shot him and killed him. The governor spoke about it one time at a church This happened 4 days after they signed the 10-round magazine thing, 4 days after they signed the red flag law that's going to become law this year. But that was the only time they ever spoke of it. It barely, I don't even think it made national news, but I guarantee you they counted it in the mass shootings numbers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And because there's numbers that skew it. There's take, for example, and this doesn't make it any worse for any victim or anything like that. I'm not trying to say that, but a mass shooting, you think of a mass shooting as a stranger walking into a school or a mall or whatever, a movie theater. But they also, when a family member gets in a family dispute and maybe goes off the rails and kills family members inside a home, if there's 4 or more, that's a mass shooting.
That's right.
Yeah. So those are the type of numbers that, the person can go outside of his own domestic dispute.
And so he kills himself, his family, right?
Yeah.
Because I believe
drive-bys.
If it's a murder-suicide, the actual suicide is also counted in the death toll, correct?
Yes.
So,
yes.
You really only have to kill 3 people and yourself, and it's a mass shooting, So the numbers are going to be skewed. The numbers are made to reflect a certain narrative. We know that. We get that. The problem is that's what it is. So as much as we dislike it, that's the narrative out there. And I think it's interesting that we talk about, in generalities, the gun. And our side's going to continue to say in a mass shooting, it's not the gun. It's not the gun. It's not the gun. The other side's going to sit there and say, it's the gun. It's the gun. It's the gun. So my question is this: at what point, as much as it may hurt us, the gun itself is not evil, but there is evil utilizing a tool that we use responsibly, we appreciate, we respect, and we utilize ourselves. But at what point does our community at least need to see the elephant in the room and say that the gun is not the problem itself, but it is being utilized to generate evil in our country? And if it continues to happen at the rate that it is the Second Amendment under some serious attacks at this point? It's opening up, and I open that up to the whole panel is at what point do we have to try to get out ahead of this and quit using the same old rhetoric? It's not the gun. It's not the gun. I'm not trying to sound anti-gun. I hope I'm not. I'm just stating the facts that the gun is being utilized for evil. I know there are a lot of other things that are causing more, but the same old argument that our community continues to have doesn't seem to be changing anybody's mind. Is there something else that we should try?
Do y'all have, I've got, that actually relates to some of this research that I was doing, unless somebody else wants to chime in on that. So I have just read the TAPS Act, and I'm getting the sponsor of that right now. I'm looking, I've got, my husband's looking that up. My husband's he's the research king. And so I've got 23 pages here, and we can go over some of it because I think some of it is important and some of it is relevant to what we're talking about here. And we don't have to go over it all, but I have talking points, and then I actually have flags that we need to discuss. So ultimately, at some point, we have to start changing the conversation based on what I'm seeing here in this 23 pages of crap. Is we keep going in with not the gun, and there's two. Here's the good and the bad of that, changing that narrative, because the reality is that they're using these narratives, fear-mongering narratives, as a way to create gun control, which is being reinforced by what I'm reading here in this TAPS Act, to put some legislation in place that I'll get into in a minute, but is essentially a different version of the Patriot Act, kind of an updated version of the Patriot Act is what this is looking like.
Before you get going, there are people that may not understand when you say the TAPS Act.
So I've got that right here.
Yeah, HR 838. Unfortunately, it was presented by Brian Babin from Texas, and I think Crenshaw is involved in it somehow too. But it is the Threat Assessment, Prevention, and Safety Act, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, and I'll read you this. I'll read you this here. I've got 2 paragraphs, but the first one I'll read you here is the relevancy of it is: for decades, a process to identify, investigate, assess, and mitigate threats has been in place to counter targeted violence. Pioneered by the U.S. Secret Service, behavioral threat assessment and management has proven successful in protecting our presidents and foreign dignitaries. If this process works to protect the president, elected officials, foreign dignitaries, and even celebrities, why aren't we using it to protect our children and local communities? So this is the rhetoric that they're putting out there to push this with. So the resources, I literally printed this from the government. From the government page. So anybody can do it. I'll post a link up here in a second. So essentially what they're looking to do is to create a way to allow for arbitrary profiling and things. So here's where it gets hot, right? The reality is that we're seeing legislation being put in place with very vague wording, intentionally so, based on the way it's written, to allow for more invasive, more Fourth Amendment violations, really, than Second, and then backdoor Second Amendment through the Fourth. So if we as a gun culture really want to get a legitimate and valid argument, we have to get away from, like Trey said, get away from it's not the gun and kind of get more into what they're really doing and start trying to really educate in that. The challenge is, of course, then we look crazy. Right? So that, right, oh, it can't be that bad, but because nobody's actually going to take the time to read this. So what does that look like for us? Does that mean that we really do need to collectively create some sort of, I've said this for a while, for those that know, create a more effective, quote unquote, marketing plan within the gun culture, as lack of a better word. The gun control side has one. They have a marketing plan and it's very well executed. We do not. So is that what this looks like? Do we really need to start making a heavier, collectively, how many subscribers, and I granted, I realize that some are going to be overlapping, just on YouTube alone, what Eric's got, Iraq veteran, he's got 2 million followers or something like that. So collectively, how many do you have? So if you were to even get 50% of those people to actually put out and educate, how many potential millions of people could you be reaching to actually educate the way it needs to be, and stop? Because it's not the gun, like Trey said, we have nothing to back that up. You know what I mean? Michael's done some of the best in terms of combating it from the mental health side, but they've got a really good marketing plan that we don't have, and that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. Whoa, is that me?
That's you, big guy.
No, something sounded weird in the phone. And I think you're right. And I've spoken about this myself. And it's like, yes, guns are used to kill people, and guns are also used to stop those very same people. Firearms are used to protect people between 250,000 to 2 million times a year. I'm like, so yeah, I'm not denying that it's an efficient, effective tool. Now, my question to you, and again, we were talking about having a conversation with everyday people, and that's part of the conversation. Is like, I have trained and carry a tool that allows me to defend myself against most physical threats. You choose not to do so and ignore the fact, people who choose not to do so ignore the fact that the government didn't stop the first mass shooting, didn't stop the latest mass shooting, and won't stop the next mass shooting regardless of what law they pass. So what are you dependent on when you're saying, hey, we need to pass a law because the other 20,000 laws didn't work?
Right.
What makes you think the next one will?
Redundancy doesn't make it right.
Right. I think when you get away from social media, and you're sitting with people every day, they're getting that. I own a day spa and I sit with women all day long, and some of the people that are very sensitive to this stuff, and even the people that are very, tend to be anti-gun, the conversation that's starting to happen now is they're getting it. They're like, the laws aren't working. So of course, now when they're in their fear head, right, it's let's just ban everything, and they're not equating that that's not going to work either. But the conversation is definitely coming around that they're understanding. I want to say something about this that just popped up in a second, but is starting to gun supporters, not necessarily gun control zealots, but they want gun control. Is that they're starting to see that these laws aren't working, and literally, I get the question, then what is the answer? So even though they may, so is it, are we staying in our own, ironically, in our own gun culture echo chamber, only hearing the anti-gun rhetoric too? And do we need to come out of, does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, we're only says in our echo chamber, but in that echo chamber, we're also only receiving certain amounts of information that is being put out there by mass media. So it's really what I've talked about before, is getting back into your neighborhoods and your culture, you know what I mean, your churches and your and getting at that grassroots level and getting it out of, use social media as your supplement, or a tool, but also you need to be able to interact with these people outside of there. So it's like somebody, one of the things that just came in, and this is what I see a lot, and I know that I would say that it's safe to assume that most of the people on this panel here would agree with me. There was a gentleman that just came in, and I can't remember, I shouldn't assume, they just came in and said they will only and we will only. That's one of the biggest challenges that we continue to have, and that I butt heads with constantly in the gun culture, is the gun culture side tends to run a little bit more conservative and to the red side. And there's always, that's because liberals this, that's because liberals that. Do you know how many liberals are pro 2A? Michael can tell you probably. There's a lot of them. And the conservative side is just as bad as the liberal side about their obstinance. And when everybody stops thinking red and blue and liberal and conservative and starts thinking American, then you can start making that change. But both sides have fed into that, drank that Kool-Aid about, then that's a vote for the other side. And red staters, y'all are just as bad as the blue on that. And I've got to call you guys out on that. And I see it constantly. So there's got to be accountability on what language that pro-gun people use about their conservatism, because they're alienating a huge group of people, voting people, LGBTQ, you can't say minorities anymore because nobody's really a minority anymore, but you know what I mean? Like other races, ethnicities, nationalities, that language.
Yep.
Different.
Particularly LGBTQ, man, y'all are missing a huge voting.
This is one of the issues that I find in the diversity shoots when I host them, because yes, many in those firearms forums, liberal this, Democrats this, and I'm like, pump the brakes. One, we're in Jersey. Don't act as if you're not going to be sitting beside someone that might vote blue or is a liberal. Two, don't act as if your Republicans are actually Republicans in this state and are all pro 2A, because they're not. So let's break out of these boxes that we continually put ourselves in, because it's a lie and it's used to segregate you just so they can continue to ride herd over you. So stop with that. It's ridiculous. And another thing, doing all this name calling turns people off that are already skittish coming into the range in the first place because they think it's a Klan rally. So now you're talking
with a black man running it.
Well, that's one of the things that calms some of them down and also confuses the hell out of them.
That's like, what's his name from Chappelle? What was his name?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But I'm like, no, just stop that, because you're alienating people and you're frightening people because they are assuming already that this is just anti them. And then when I often have conversations with people, because I break the group down, people go shoot, people go eat, and then I go around the room visiting each individual. And sometimes they come in groups of, let's say, a group of Hispanic ladies or a group of Muslim men and women. And I have this conversation. I do it one-on-one, because that's how we're going to win this, is a grassroots conversational thing. You're not going to do it in your echo chamber, and you're definitely not going to do it on social media or in a tweet. You're going to have to approach this as a human being to human being and find common ground. I'm reading some of the stuff we're talking over in the chat. No, we're not only gun people, we do a bunch of different things. And that's going to be the level you have to approach people on, because a lot of the people screaming and confused by what the news is saying aren't gun people at all. They believe that somehow my AR-15 can get 1,200 rounds a minute out of it. And I'm going to have a conversation with them as a person, not stating facts, not going, you know how many people die a day in car accidents? No, we're going to have to talk about this as human beings that can think and respect each other. And that's how we're going to do this, and also being politically active too.
So let me kind of transition, because I'm getting ready to ask a question that's going to be controversial. It's going to piss some people off. But it's a question I think that needs to be asked. Clover and I were talking earlier on the phone today, and I think, Tony, you're right. There are people out there that are going to get their information from media, whether it's news, whether it's YouTube, wherever it is, they're going to get their information without knowing what it is. So they're going to believe certain things until they are proven wrong. Unfortunately, the discussion that has is we don't want to understand their emotions, the other side's emotions. They don't want to understand our facts. Okay. That is what it is. We're not going to change that. But let me ask you a question. This is going to piss some people off, but I think it's going to be interesting. I'm going to go to Clover first because we had this discussion. But the question is, bringing up, we're not just gun people. There's other aspects of our lives that, kids, sports, whatever it is, we have lives outside of our gun lives. Is there a chance that maybe, what in the hell?
Sorry, I was turning on YouTube so I can read the comments. I don't get the comments on my screen. It's all
right. So let me ask you this. Is there a chance that at times our community is too pro 2A? It's too 2A. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Instead of being gun people, sometimes we piss people off. So I want to go to Clover first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, I think we have way too many that focus not on living their life to the fullest, and then the Second Amendment being a subset, just as anything else in their life would be. But they put the Second Amendment up on such an unattainable pedestal, and it skews their life. And I think we've got a lot of people out there, and that blinds them, unfortunately, to the fact, but to the way in which they need to reach other people that are out there that are living their day-to-day lives. We say, okay, well, they're gun owners, they're hunters. Okay, well, they have a firearm in the home for self-defense. Oh, well, they carry for self-defense, but that's all they do. They don't show up for rallies. They don't pay attention to legislation. Many of them probably don't even support or donate to pro-Second Amendment organizations and stuff like that. It's just not a thought. We're not born activists. We're not born Second Amendment supporters. It's a process. It's a process for everybody. And for some people, they get a taste of that process and they go wild and crazy with it. And they forget about the life and the lives of others and the world that they live in. They're just completely blinded by this one thing. And I don't think that's healthy. And I don't think that affords you the necessary tools that you need to be able to reach out to other people in order to secure that Second Amendment.
All right. I want to bring G in because he's in the back. He's kind of like putting baby in the corner. He's back there being quiet, but he's in the private chat. He's putting some good points. I want to bring G in before I go to Mike. And G, do you have anything that you want to touch that we've discussed already? And I know you've got some points that you've made in the chat. You want to bring those up out in the panel?
Man, I don't know. This is not my first rodeo, right? I've been paying attention to this stuff for a little while, and I've been active in doing things online for a while, and these things happen periodically and consistently, and I'm hesitant to dig into the specifics of this one because I'd rather look at it from a bigger perspective of us as a culture or community, as on a calendar, over time. This isn't a conversation we would have been able to have in 2013. The community, and I'll keep saying that, it wasn't active. We didn't have a community yet. It takes time for this stuff to happen. Nothing happens overnight. It might be, I don't know how many times people have dealt with this and what level of participation in the community you had as you've experienced these things over the years. But if we look at these things from, I don't know what characteristics you use or what waymarks to use to validate them all. But at first we were helpless, and then we got together and we had a resistance to Obama's executive actions in 2013, and that created a community. And it isn't perfect, and it's not like we're some kind of Borg where we just all have the same shared consciousness and we're able to work effectively. But I mean, if we look at this over the years, we haven't solved it, but we've certainly gained all kinds of people and resources and strategies, organizations and efforts, both failures and successes. So the fact that we're having this conversation is something that we shouldn't overlook, right? That we shouldn't be unaware that we're having a different conversation now than we had in 2013. But at the same time, it's difficult to answer your question specifically because we are doing the same conversations over and over and over. And it might seem like we're talking to a choir or whatever, but at Jeff Knox, at the first AmCon in Dallas 2 years ago, there was a similar the conversation led to a similar sort of frustration. And he said he's a member of a church choir, and the reason you practice as a choir is so that everybody learns the songs and everybody learns to sing on tune, and everybody, that's where you practice. When we go to, he didn't say this, but when we go to the range, we practice so that when we need to use our firearms, we can, and for whatever reasons we need to perform, we can perform, right? So yeah, this might seem like we're singing to the choir, but it's unrealistic to think that anything we say or anything any group of people can say is just going to change things, right? So if we look at it over the years, we have been changing things. Their arguments are desperate, but they have not used the same arguments over and over because we as a community have been able to effectively deter their garbage, and we'll continue to do that. So I understand that when we dig into something like this, it's frustrating and we have a need to defend ourselves and all the craziness that's going on out there. But at the same time, don't be frustrated that we're singing to the choir. We're perfecting our abilities. And like I said in the side chat there, what happens when we sing this in these echo chambers, when we practice conversation in these echo chambers, we're more effective out there in the real world when we're talking to our friends, our family, our people at school, work in church, civic organizations, and just people in line at the store, at the doctor's office and stuff. If we're better able, we're more competent and capable in our conversations, that changes things in society. I agree with everybody that real change happens on the streets and in real life conversations. So these conversations have evolved over time. We're standing on the shoulders of others, and doom on the antis. They are motivated by dollars. They're motivated by their paychecks. So they go to work and they come home and they're doing whatever they do for a part-time. We live this stuff. We're dedicated, and we've got the gun rights policy coming up, and gun rights policy conference coming up in just a few days, 40 something days probably. And we're going to have a chance for even more organizations and individuals to come together, and I don't think we're going to be a Borg-like. I don't think that's our goal, right? To be Borg-like. Instead, we want to value our diversity, right? Stealing Tony's word. And that's where we're going to be as effective as we can. And we're not going to change anything, but we've also got new environments coming. Old strategies aren't going to work for them the same way they're not going to work for us. We've got a new shift in demographics. The millennials will take over this election, and our parents and us will have no influence in future elections. It'll simply be the new kids. So everyone's going to have to change their appeals. We're diverse and dynamic. We're using these tools and these skill sets. They're getting paid by Bloomberg. So I think that the ball's in our court. We've got the advantage, and that's why it's tough to answer the specific question about this.
That's a great way of putting it. That was probably the most articulate description of that I've heard in terms of the ball being in our court, because we are trying to make that effort to embrace younger generations and shift. But we do need to make sure that old guard is shifted out of there. That was well done, man. That was great.
He's the guy from if you've ever seen the movie Old School, and they're having a debate class, and Will Ferrell has like this brain freeze. It just spurts out this most amazing thing. That's what G-Web just did. He didn't mean to do that. He got lucky, but no.
G-Webs and I have had this conversation. G-Webs and I have had this conversation before, and I'm in agreement with him. And also, I don't think we're too pro 2A, but I think a lot of us focus on just the firearms related part of it, and that's when you're losing somebody that has no background or even interest in firearms or the firearms related part of it. Again, it's how you approach people. If you're talking, listen, I'm not into dirt bikes, but if every time we talk about car accidents, you bring up dirt bikes, I don't even know. I think that's a horrible analogy that fell apart as I was saying it. But if you're not talking to me about something I'm interested in, if you're telling me about how many rounds per minute an AR really shoots, or, you know, the thing they just put up from the BBC, that's not really a Ruger LCR, that's a Smith & Wesson, I don't care. So you're going to have to talk to people at that level. And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I think we're all saying. You're going to have to talk to people as individuals. And when it comes to gun owners, a lot of people love talking about the pew-pew. They love talking about the gear. And when you try to ask them, have they written or even know who their representatives are, the answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no, and they haven't done it. And I'm like, well, how many different things do you have to live through as a gun owner? How many attacks on your civil rights before you're going to take a part of this? And I'm not saying go to every rally. I'm saying, why don't you at least have the basic knowledge of who your reps are? NRA ILA's website will take you directly to them and give you a link to them and their emails and their phone numbers. I mean, there's stuff out there that makes it easy for you to not just become an activist, but just participate in that process. And that's what too many gun owners aren't doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I want to bring in, hold on. I haven't talked to Mike in a while. Mike in real quick and getting back to taps and some of these red flags. The reason why I think that, and G's right, this is not anything new. We go through this kind of conversation every time that there's one of these tragedies. But this one's different for me because the first time we get a Republican president, and I say Republican loosely, but a Republican president now asking and inviting mental health red flag laws. From your point of view, can you tell me, right? I mean, from your point of view, and Welcome to Talk America's point of view, can you tell me truly, is there a true danger with red flag laws right now? Have we had precedent where it's been what in the world is going on with G-Webs? Anyways, is there precedent that you know of that it has been enforced somewhere that due process has then become? Are we worried about a boogeyman that really isn't coming, or is this something that, in your opinion, the red flag laws are truly evil?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I do not speak for everybody in Walk to Talk America. Walk to Talk America is made up of different people that are in the firearms industry, and for me to speak on behalf of some of them would be wrong. We disagree. We get in fights. We tell each other to F off all the time. So, you know, I can't sit here and say this. I'm speaking for it as a whole. I will tell you my opinion. I am the ungunned gun guy. Okay. I'm out there actually bridging these gaps. I feel more than most. My thing is red flag laws are different on a state by state level. Okay. And the one thing that we have done in our echo chamber, which is, you know, could hurt us or maybe it helps us get in tune, as G-Web said, is that we treat the red flag laws as if it's an F5 Twister in the movie Twister or the Boogeyman, right? You're not supposed to talk about it. And if you are talking about it, you're not supposed to say anything that would remotely make you think that you are for them. But I know for a fact that a red flag law saved one of my good friend's father's life. Okay. I know. And no one can tell me any different. And I would argue with them because every time I try to get an answer of what they would have done in my friend's situation, no, it's crickets. Like people run. So I believe that the issue that we have when talking about these red flag laws, we default to a negative, non-discussion type, you know, attitude. Is like, we're going to talk about that. And if that's your whole thing, then I'm done talking to you and you're an idiot and you're this and this and that. I think that what everyone needs to do, and if you really want to be educated, is like read the red flag laws state by state. There are some where you have to actually have a family member and everything. They got to go to a court first.
Correct.
Okay. Then yes, there are some places where I would not want to even be part of New York and New Jersey. Tony, I'm from Jersey, so I feel your pain, brother. There are places there.
Washington.
Washington is where my friend's dad's life got saved. So, and if you've heard that story,
yeah, I have.
Yeah. I mean, those police officers did everything to let it stay within a family, a family issue. They and everything was fine until the father basically physically put his hands on one of the kids and drew his firearm. Right. So if you're going to shoot your own kid or put your hands around someone's throat, somebody needs to step in. I don't want that to represent the 2A community, because most of us would never do something like that. So clearly he tried and it came back to hurt him. But having said that, Kerry, you know I'm not a big red flag law or abuser.
Oh yeah, I know, yeah. Well, and I know his story. I've talked to him and been on a podcast with him, and I do know that story. And there's been some extensions to the red flag law here in Washington State that it's kind of one of those things, and you and I have talked about this several times also, Mike, in the live streams that we've done. It's not always what's written in them, it's how they're not written that allows for arbitrary language and stuff. And that's where my story comes in as a domestic violence survivor, and how some of these laws are written. They actually put domestic violence survivors into a category to potentially be disarmed and hurt. Oh, hey, there's Rob Pincus. And which allows them to potentially be disarmed based on blanketed arbitrary lack of definition. And that was my big thing that threw me into this with 1639. Is it's not what was written per se. It's what was not written into that law that allows for complete arbitrary definitions and language, which is what this little guy is right here, this HR 838, the TAPS thing. And let me know, Trey, when you're ready to get into this, because I've got some really great notes and an outline. Like we're ready over here for this. But it's essentially how it's not written. I mean, what's not in it. And so it is one of those kind of sticky conversations that will piss off a lot of people, like Michael said, that are watching, where you get into, we're going to talk about red flag laws, and could we entertain the idea now, before calm your ball sacks out there, before anybody loses it on me, could the idea potentially be entertained if the gun culture is not willing to self-police and actually put a formal plan into place, much like the movie theater thing, if you guys don't know about that, but, and ratings with movie theaters, that was completely self-policed. And a lot of people think it was FCC regulation. It wasn't. It was a self-police. They solved a problem before it became legislative. So if we are not going to self-police and be self-responsible within the community, and B, if the law is written to such detail that every T is crossed and I is dotted, could we then, as a gun culture, potentially entertain the concept and idea of a red flag law if it goes into very specific language as to what exactly it's going to allegedly be benefiting?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing about the red flag law that worries me this time. I am generally not scared of the red flag laws to a certain extent, because I feel that the people that are actually enforcing this, the local law enforcement, they don't want to go. I don't think that most of them want to go to someone's house to confiscate. I really don't. I think that, and Mike knows that the story is in a state where red flag laws were present, a law enforcement officer helped the situation not go towards this route, and it saved lives and it saved a lot of hassle. So I don't think that law enforcement truly wants to jump in this. That being said, what scares me this time is not the red flag law itself. And I was talking with Clover and Tony a little bit before this, is when you have a president come out and publicly say, I welcome and I want to see red flag laws on my desk, what that does is open up Pandora's box, because it's not the red flag law that scares me. It's the 27 other attachments and riders that are going to be attached to this bill, that when it comes down to the committee and the floor of compromise, we're going to be stuck with some parts of legislation that get attached to the red flag law that are going to drastically change the legislation, because now we have to compromise, because now our president has asked for it. I want to bring Rob in, and Rob, I know that you had an interesting day, but we've been talking about having conversations and echo chambers and what we can do to maybe take that next step to change a conversation instead of having the same one over and over again. Is it good or bad? Obviously, red flag laws have come in. I know it's kind of hard for you to jump in midstream, but you've been a busy man. Is there anything that's happened in the last 48 hours that you would like to discuss about where this is all heading?
Well, yeah, I'd love just to kind of throw in. I appreciate you guys letting me jump in. It was kind of a crazy day. Did the CBS Evening News thing. You guys, I mean, you got it covered. I mean, look at the panel, right? I mean, you got everybody here. Tony, Kerry, Mike, you guys obviously are always here. And there's a lot of different perspectives being represented. So I just came in to say hi, essentially. You know, the CBS Evening News thing was a bunch of hoops to jump through. It was kind of cool to get that opportunity. You guys know I don't say no to those opportunities to represent the gun community at the national level. Unfortunately, it went from, you know, a 10-minute interview down to a literally 4
All
or
right,
5
he's buffered, so we'll come back when he gets back on. There you go. He's back. All right, there you go. He's back.
I'm back. Okay.
Froze there for a second.
Anyway, I'll jump out real quick, but I will say that, you know, what Kerry just said and what you just said, and I think where Mike was going too, is these red flag laws, it's not the idea of it. Remember, we were calling for this, right? After Sandy Hook, we were calling for why didn't they do something? Why didn't they do something as a community? So here's the trick. We need to be involved in the conversations about them being written. For everything Kerry just said, everything that you just said, Trey, we need to be involved in the conversations. We can't sit on the sidelines just being mad because they're going to happen. And that's really, I mean, I know you guys can cover this. I didn't want to let you guys down because I knew you had said I was going to be on the show. I appreciate it. It's been a long day. I will see you guys on the internet.
Thanks for coming in, bud.
That's it? That's all we're getting?
Yeah, that's all we get. That was fast.
Rob's a superstar. Rob's a superstar. He ain't got time for you peasants.
Hey, Tony, he's Hollywood now. He's Hollywood now.
Well, at least I don't have to worry about he and I butting heads. That's probably good, because I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is not going to go well." That's true, but you know, it's interesting because Rob and I and people have seen us kind of, you know, before, and for those of us that are in our friend group, they know, you know, that they've seen that or whatever. But the reality is that he and I, it's the strong personality thing, but we actually have the same vision long term particularly about self-policing and self-responsibility in the community. So when you're ready, so this TAPS thing.
Hold on, hey Kerry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. This is exactly what that was.
I'm gonna bounce in a few. So I just want to get on about that, us participating in the legislation. See, that's great if you can. But now, again, I'm only talking about here in New Jersey, so I can't apply to anyone else. We're definitely firearms owners left out of that conversation intentionally.
Yeah, intentionally.
There are no, and I do have to throw this on gun owners too. When we have organizations that do try to get in on that conversation, gun owners start screaming to high heaven that you're selling us out. And it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't complain about not being invited to the table and then complain about being at the table. Right. Now, either you help write the legislation.
Could you say that a little louder for those in the back? A little louder for those in the back.
You either have to help write the legislation or not. You can't have it both ways. You can't complain about not being able to be in the room and then bitch about, well, you're in there and you're selling us out. It's not selling us out. It's trying to come up with conditions that make sense. Yes, I want people to be safer. See, the red flag laws, the problem we had here in this state is laws like that were already on the books, right? But it took adjudication to do it. Now they've skipped over that part and they made it so broad that pretty much in a hospital, anybody, including the candy striper, can say that you're a problem and get your guns taken away, and the state can keep them up to a year before they give them back. And that's if they give them back.
That's in, just to be fair, that's in New Jersey, Tony. Yeah.
But I'm talking about where I'm from and what I live with and what I went and testified against. And as gun owners, again, if you want to be at the table, you can't say anybody that shows up is a sellout. You have to get in on this. You have to be part of the political process, because believe me, the anti-freedom forces will gladly freeze us out of those conversations. So that's what I have to say. I got to roll and get the gun and gear review. Really thank you for having me on, and I really appreciate talking to you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
Hi, Tony.
staying on the red flag thing, I got a text earlier from Sarah from holdmyguns.org, and she made me aware of an article that David Trahan wrote up in Maine about what they're doing with red flag laws. I'm going to put the link to the article up there. If you've got a time to go look at it, it's fascinating because the way they're doing it up in Maine is they are forcing due process. They are trying to understand, and I hate to use the word sensible, and I hate to use the word sensible gun control, but a red flag law is not gun control. It's a way to help someone help a community possibly from someone that could cause harm for a temporary time if done right. Now the problem is the slippery slope has just begun, because now due process, you get the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. I even say that the First Amendment is in jeopardy here. But when you've got someone that's at least trying to sit there and say that if you're going to do something, the most sacred part of due process is having due process. Let's not forget, let's not throw it out and put it in the trash and forget about it. If you're going to write a red flag law, please, for the love of all that's holy in this world, understand that we are Americans, whether we are pro-gun or anti-gun, whether we agree on this fact or not, we're Americans. And there's a great quote, Clover and I knows, he knows a quote already. There's a great quote from a movie back in the 90s that said, America is hard. America is advanced citizenship. Okay. Now, the problem we have is we are going to sit there and say that our side, we're going to fight with our facts. They're going to fight with their emotions. The problem is we're not listening to anyone.
Right.
They're not listening to us. We're not listening to them. So this argument is going back and forth. We have to start listening to each other.
We're assholes.
Well, everyone is.
Yeah.
Everyone, no matter what side of this you're on,
that's right.
Everyone is not taking what the other person is saying.
That's right.
You're going to throw the facts at them. They don't want to hear our facts. They don't believe our facts. They're
thinking from here.
Understand. They're going to throw the emotions at us. We understand that emotions are bad, especially after evil has taken place. Yeah. So it's just one of those things that I think that we have to evolve into a society that we forget if we're Republicans or Democrats. We forget if we're pro-gun or anti-gun, and remember that we're Americans. Remember that initially this was created by a bunch of very, very, very intelligent people that had this idea of a country. And the reason why the Second Amendment exists is to protect all other amendments. Now, the greatest thing about what our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, did was it didn't give us these rights. It guaranteed our rights. It guaranteed rights that we already had as human beings, but we were the first civilization to guarantee them on paper. The great thing about this is this. We're going to evolve. We're going to, as a country, we're going to go through ups and downs. We made it through the Civil War. We've made it through a lot of things. We're going to see evil. We're going to see bad parts of our country. But ultimately, when do we not just throw down and say, look, we don't have to agree on everything, but surely we can agree that the right to protect ourselves and our loved ones comes above and beyond anything else. Maybe that's something that we don't agree. I don't know. So I'm going to throw it out there to you is here's my dilemma. I don't know the next step. I would like to think that we can come up with a solution, but I honest to God, I don't. And I'm going to throw this up to the individual, the whole panel. Let's start talking about this. What can we do to change the narrative that's going on in our country right now? Whether it's mental health or guns or whatever it is.
My husband just threw 2 cents down the stairs. September 12th is where we need to be back to.
There's a lot to say about that.
September,
we have to first clean our own houses.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that as I'm watching, the comment, and then I'm watching here the comments coming in. I find it kind of interesting as I go through this. So one of the things that I'm seeing is like everybody should be armed. Everybody should be armed. Okay, well, first of all, that needs to stop, because if somebody who is not comfortable with a firearm, we should not put one in their hand. End of story. We're only doing ourselves as a disservice. The other side of that, y'all, is the gun culture thinks that the Second Amendment was written exclusively for them, and that is not true. The right to bear arms is any and all means of self-defense to protect yourself, your family, your property, and your country from tyranny. That's any and all means of self-defense. So
it does not mean necessarily an outside force.
An outside force, right? Exactly. In fact, this is a super abbreviated version of this for my military guys out there, so don't lose your poo on me. But the first and foremost responsibility of the United States military is to protect its borders and its citizens inside of it from foreign or domestic, threats.
Actually, it's not true.
Well, I'm kind of paraphrasing it.
Is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Right.
The Constitution.
Right, which is supposed to be protecting the citizens. And like I said,
It is. But what that means is we can have attacks on our soil. Military is going to take care of that. In essence, what the defense of our country is the defense from being taken over from another government who wishes to impose their belief system on our country. So technically, we would protect our way of life.
Right. So it's like my husband just said, my husband's still active duty. And I know that Trey, we've all had some good conversations about this. He says, actually, the military's responsibility is to uphold the Constitution, whereas the Constitution is therefore supposed to be upholding. That's the better way of articulating it. So, but back to that Second Amendment thing, for all of these people that are out there that are obsessing about, we need to arm everybody. Everybody needs a gun. Not everybody needs a gun. And if y'all are really wanting to look at just sheer numbers of support, maybe they should start being a little bit more inclusive of other means of the way that people, choose to defend themselves. And that is something that I've had some conversations with people about. And let's be realistic, a lot of these worlds tend to they move in and out of each other, like the gun culture and the martial arts culture. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, really. But there's a lot of people that tend to stay exclusive in their little cubby holes all over. But if they were to all unite and understand that all of that is the fundamental idea of defense, now you have a bigger conversation available and about what Second Amendment means, which means that you have larger numbers to combat that anti-gun concept. And now they start to lose their argument of it just being about a gun, as opposed to about self-defense in general, which is what the right to bear arms is. Does that make sense? Because it made a lot more sense in my head.
Mike, Grover, G, any guys want to comment on what's being said so far? Nope. Okay.
Clover,
All right.
Clover, I was going to let you go. If you want.
Yeah, I think Clover was going to say something a little bit earlier. So, Clover, you got.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can. I mean, what I was going to say when you originally posed the question, I guess, with that is that there's a lot. I come down with there's a lot of house cleaning that we've got to do. There's a lot of house cleaning we've got to do as a culture, as a community, whatever you want to call it. And that's evident by some of those that's even in the chat out there tonight. They're not listening to the conversation. God gave you 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth. The Creator, science, evolution, whatever you want to call it, gave you 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth for a reason. Why? We're supposed to take in information, way more information, vastly more information than we spew out. And there's a lot of people out there that don't do that. And I think I think we clean our own house. That starts with anybody in a position of responsibility as an activist, an advocate, a creator, whatever the case may be. If you take on that banner, then yeah, you need to make sure that your house is as clean as possible. And if you're out there, if you're complaining about things, if you're howling at the moon, what's your house look like? That's the question I want to ask everybody out there. What does your house look like? Are you reaching the next generation of Second Amendment supporters? Are you reaching out to those people in a meaningful way to have a meaningful conversation? Are you validating emotion? Emotion is a real thing. We've talked about emotion tonight. Okay. And a lot of people go, well, they just run on emotion. And what do? You're just missing the emotion. The emotion that person, and Mike can jump in here and follow up on this. The emotion that person is feeling even if they're running on emotion, that's real to them. And we have to be able to address that in a way that respects that truth, that it's real to them.
Yeah, that's a big thing with trauma survivors like DV and PTSD. And it's interesting. Just one quick note of that. As we're talking about accountability and cleaning house, those of y'all that throw that crap out there, and I'm big on that, right? Because I'm big on logic, and I that was my big thing. Is it's our responsibility now to stay calm, to keep the temperature down in the gun culture. But for those of you that yell that and y'all are just being emotional, guess what you're doing? You're being emotional.
Yeah.
You're literally doing what you're saying. The other side. You're talking out of your asses.
Yeah, Mike, do you either want to come in and talk about this?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm having a much different. I guess that's the whole thing. Maybe it's the gun guy thing, but I'm having much different results in all my work. I don't get any crap from the other side. I sit down with them. I actually have Mental Health America now going after the SAFE Act. Many times they have not even realized that the language in some of the applications and everything like that actually discriminates against people that battle mental illness. So I'm having a lot of luck. So earlier there was a statement that's like, what are we doing to help change that narrative? I mean, I feel like I'm doing it, and I guess that's why I'm getting salty with the rest of the industry, because it shouldn't take this long. And it's a weird dynamic. The dynamic that we face, and this is coming from a person who is like an insider on the business side of things. One thing we have to understand is Trump did not help the firearms industry in terms of staying alive. I think you're going to see some people go out of business. I know there's tough times. I talk to my friends at other manufacturers, and I know that they're hurting. Where we really failed, and I don't really care to go look back, is when we were making the Obama money, and that's really what it was. He was the greatest gun salesman of all time. We didn't invest in the things that we talked about. We should have been going directly at suicide and underprivileged, underserved communities when we had all this money. Now I'm knocking on the door saying, look, we can do these things and run at it. And they're like, well, we're broke. We didn't invest back in ourselves to fix the problems because I don't think we thought it was going to end. I mean, there's a defense in that. I certainly thought I was the greatest gun salesman of all time in 2012 and 13. And so did my crew. And then we got punched in the face, and then we learned that we weren't that great at selling.
A lot of people got punched in the face. Yeah.
Right. So, my thought process is we could do better. I think it starts with, and you're going to have to listen to a lot of nonsense and just sit there and talk it out. And sometimes you have to concede certain things. I mean, suicide prevention, like the people that work in suicide prevention, they like the idea of universal background checks. So what I found is most 2A supporters that are in suicide prevention prefer that there's universal background checks. That's where, you see what I'm saying? That's the one place where it hits right along the line. And I have the arguments with them, and their argument makes sense for what's important to them. And that's what I think we have to understand, the variables of everything that everyone cares about. For me, there are certain things that I'm like, yeah, it doesn't bother me, but that's the way I grew up, right? There's certain things. I never shot a bump stock until I heard about a bump stock. Right. So I would have gone the rest of my life not really understanding that they existed. And you could have taken them away and I would have never known it. You know what I mean? So
that was a big conversation in my house. I mean, that's me having, right? Like you're talking about 2012, y'all. I didn't even know there was a gun culture until November 7th of last year. I'm like, oh crap, there's a whole world out here. And, we were on this bump stock thing last year, and, my husband being, in military and stuff, he's like, all right. I mean, we understood the greater ramifications of what that means with every little inch, but he's like, okay, you know what I mean? It's almost like choose. And I get it, y'all. So before y'all come at me in the chat, I get it when you're talking about you give a little bit and they keep going. But at the same time, what are you going to dig your heels in on, and what are you just going to let go? Like, when is it time to actually put the energy in and and fight. And I'm not saying I have one attitude about it or the other. I'm presenting that as a question. Like, at what point do you go, all right?
Did they write the Second Amendment? Refresh my memory.
I didn't hear you. What'd you say? How you cut out?
Did they write accessories into the Second Amendment? Did it say like "Thou shalt not infringe on my right to bear arms and bump stocks"?
And highly decorative, like ornamental grips and
right. Yeah. Please say they wrote Hello Kitty grips out of the Second Amendment.
They better not have. Damn
Those
it!
are annoying.
My husband, he's got a whole thing about the Hello Kitty AR rifle and trying to get the social media will give you advertisements for stuff when you talk about it around your phone and stuff. So he was always like, really want one of those Hello Kitty ARs. Nothing ever shows up with the AR.
Now
proposes a revision.
On this side chat that I think is nice. G, I don't know if you want to bring it up, but he says that we've been in this fight. This is not the beginning of the battle. And I think that that is very, very true. We have seen this before. And
well, I guess what I'm saying is, if you, like Kerry's saying, she's new to the culture, community, whatever we're allowed to say it, how we're allowed to describe the subset of our population that's aware of firearms and rights. So, and here's the thing. Everybody's, there's no law, there's no requirement, there's really no obligation. It's a self motivating type of thing, and it's up to the individual. So you can be into guns, you could be a competitive shooter, you could literally be in the biz and just not be all that interested in Second Amendment. There's no qualifications of being in the gun industry or getting in the gun culture or being in the gun community or whatever you want to call any of this. So anybody can get woke, or you can touch home, or they can get interested and then they lose interest. I mean, I'm telling you, one of my worst motivational issues is all the people that have come and gone. I mean, I like having these conversations, but I do not like having to have these conversations over and over and over with new people. There's been guards that have come and gone. So that's why I say we've been in this fight, and not just we, like people in this room, like gun owners since the Second Amendment, have always had the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. That's important words. They all have significance there. So we have been in this fight. I think one of the things that a challenge that we need to understand and deal with, and I'm optimistic on all this, is as people, the old guard either gets discouraged, dies, gets sick, something happens, and the baton gets passed, right? So I'm thinking of this as being in the trenches in World War I or something. Am I breaking up? Being in the trenches in World War I, where some little new kid comes out of training, gets stuck into the trench, and there's no like rules, there's no book to read. You just start learning from those who have been there fighting, right? Don't stick your head up over there. It's muddy over here. You learn how to deal with it. And that's what we need to understand, is that when we jump into this fight, we're standing on shoulders, and those people may or may not be there to boost us, but let's not think that and it can be frustrating thinking, oh, this is overwhelming. It's not overwhelming. We're in the midst of a battle. Once you get your wits about you, once you get your sea legs, you'll understand that it's not really chaos. It's just a battle, and there's allies, and we take losses and stuff, but overall we're winning. That's why I say we're not in it. We're not starting this fight. We've been in it for a long time. We just have to get more accustomed to understanding that we're the next soldiers of the next group, and we're going to eventually get taken out and they'll become after us. So instead of just back in the olden days, if somebody like Neil Knox did all his work and changed the NRA, except that he wrote a book, luckily he wrote a book, or his kids wrote a book for him to let people know that history. Now we don't have that anymore. We've got the internet. Everything is documented all the time. Now our challenge isn't to record history, but to determine what history is worth keeping and valid, and not get discouraged that we're doing something for the first time when we're not, and not think that something's overwhelming when it's not.
Can I read this to y'all right quick, since this just came in? This just came in from somebody who watched some of our stuff, everybody, and became an activist himself, which is great. He says, this is too long for the chat, but please show this to Kerry. My daughter's boyfriend was caught in the chaos in Dayton. Luckily, he was unharmed. She has no desire to carry, but 100% understands the necessity and reason for the Second Amendment. the point with this is if we, as a community, scream, everyone needs to carry and come and take it, we risk making people like her second guess their support for us, which was just that comment that that was just coincident that came in. But that's a really good point, with that extremist attitude. And women in particular, I'm discovering are very intimidated by gun culture because of how they're treated just right out of the gate. So I'm sorry, I wanted to read that to you guys because that was a really great piece that came in.
To that point, that's why 2 Thursdays ago, we had the first cultural competency continuing education class for mental health therapists in Reno. And the reason why that was important is because we had 14 licensed clinicians come in, and many of them had never shot a firearm. And we brought them in to learn about gun culture. And I actually got to witness the roundtable discussions. Cheryl was there. That's one of the reasons why I was happy Cheryl was there, is because I wanted somebody else besides Rob Pincus and myself to witness it that wasn't affiliated with us. But the cool thing about it was when we had to break up the group, we had to split it in half to have them go shooting. And when the one half wasn't shooting, they were having a roundtable discussion about what they had just saw in the hour and a half class that we had before we got to the range. And I was watching these clinicians kind of tackle the idea of like, they all can take your guns. And it was funny watching them try to figure out, like, they're like, how? Like, I don't even know how I would do that if I wanted to take away someone's gun without getting myself fired. Like, and I was able to witness this as just someone observing them try to battle with that. But the other cool thing was I also witnessed them talk about how cool it was to actually finally shoot a gun. And then I was able to share my stories of almost when I shit my pants when I had to shoot a gun the first time. So like it brought them in, and it wasn't a scenario where they couldn't ask questions. Like, they were actually saying stuff like, that gun looks really scary. Can you explain why that's not more deadly than that one in this term? I think that's the stuff I'm talking about. Like, we have to start bridging out to do things like that. And it gave us a perfect opportunity to kind of bring two people together, or two worlds together that never talked to each other. Or there's this misconception, like, I'm living this. I see this. There's a podcast in Vegas. I got to go there at 9 tonight at their studio. It's called Pod Therapy. These guys are two therapists that have a show. They're bringing me on. They would talk about bringing me on for a month, but obviously this thing sped it up. But we got to walk into the other world, and we got to be able to play with ideas in a nice manner. That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And particularly, go ahead.
For years for a long, long time we all remember the first time we pulled our first trigger. We remember the excitement, the adrenaline rush.
Fear.
If we can get someone to the range and introduce them to firearms in a safe, fun manner, and they understand that we're not out here looking to cause havoc in society. Some of us carry every day, but guess what? Some of us just like to shoot guns as a hobby. Some people like to do competitive shooting. Some people just like to go to the range and fire guns. And it's understanding our differences is, I think, the key. Understanding what makes us different will actually bring us together and let them understand us. But we have to understand them. We just can't sit there and yell at them the facts because we don't like the emotion that we're hearing from them. We have to listen, not hear them, but we have to listen to what they're saying. And hopefully if we show them respect by listening to them, maybe they listen to us. And as Clover says, we might not change their mind, but what if we can plant the seed? What if we can plant the seed for them to go do the research and find out the answers themselves? That might be the biggest thing. I know, Clover, you've been probably antsy to talk real quick before we get back to Kerry. Do you have anything you want to bring up on what was been discussed recently?
Well, I don't know that it goes into anything most recent, but I mean, yeah, I could talk on this forever. And, it goes back to, and there's some chatter out there in the YouTube side on the chat. I've been watching it occasionally. So, I mean, this kind of addresses that in a way too. G Webb spoke to it, I think, earlier. It's been mentioned a few times, but when your life is tied up in 2A, and that's all your life is, that's no life. So, go on a date, go out to eat, volunteer at the
That's right.
soup kitchen. For the love of God,
Get
work with a
laid.
kids shooting sports
Get
group.
laid, people. It's okay to
You
say.
know, there you go. Yeah. If it's, you know,
No judgment.
yeah, I mean, nature walk, you know, something. Find some other things in your life that are meaningful, please. For the love of God, please.
And that's with anything, really. I mean, obviously that's for us, this culture, and especially with activism. And I think that because everybody here is involved with activism, it is consuming and emotionally exhausting. And I've not even been doing this very long, and I get it. But any hobby, right? It's almost addiction, right?
Mhm.
It's that, and Michael can probably speak a little bit on that. And I think that some of the people that get to that extreme zealot level, or it's a little bit of that addiction kind of piece.
And to tag into that a little bit with the living life and stuff like that, I think that you get to a level that we tend, and I'm going to throw myself into this group too, because I do it occasionally, and I have to back up, and I have to take a step back, and I have to take a breath, breathe. That was a saying, a hashtag here recently. But we look at it purely from a legislation and a political standpoint. We look at 2A and gun culture, just all we look at. That's period. I've been at competitions with hundreds of underage kids handling firearms. Amazing stuff is going on out there. I've seen college teams open up in the last few years. I've seen high school teams brought in the last few years. There is firearm culture is still a fabric that is woven throughout this country. I mean, it's still there. And we get so hung up a lot of times, and people get so focused on the political side that they forget the societal and the community aspect of things. And here's the problem when you forget that. Think about this. Take a minute, breathe, think about this. What makes up our elected officials? What makes up our governing bodies? What makes up our law enforcement? People from our society and our community. That's where we change the game. When we can reach the ground level, Kerry's talked about it. When we can reach that ground level, we can change the next generation coming up. And make no mistake, the group of kiddos we got coming up that are late junior high, early high school right now are amazing kiddos. They're not millennials, I can promise you.
Not even close. My daughter is about as pro-capitalist, anti-government. And Michael's got teenagers.
If we can get on board with recognizing the importance of like I said, the community level and the societal impact, not the political and the legislative junk, we can change it. We can take this all the way back to NFA, What is that? Nobody's going to remember it in the future. They're going to, it was some horrible piece of gun legislation that we got rid of. We didn't need it.
Let's be realistic. Some people that are already in gun culture, they just talk out of their butts about thinking they know what it is, and they really don't know what it is either. And then there's a lot of people that aren't in gun culture that actually do know what it is. There's a lot of assumption that goes on, and that's I'm not just calling us out. That's any culture, or
any community or any culture. There's the tech community. There's the car guy. There's all different, boxes that people, and are in multiple boxes. But I think what it comes down to is we all have to some extent, drop our egos and understand that just because we're passionate about what we truly believe, it doesn't always mean that we're 100% correct. Just like the other side is not always 100% incorrect. And I think that's what the disconnect is we're not having conversations. We have two sides or two people talking at each other and not talking with each other. No one's listening anymore. No one's hearing and understanding what the other one's saying. It's because I know that you're coming from the other side, I'm going to make sure that you hear me. And the other person says, well, I want to make sure you hear me. Next thing you know, we've got two people yelling and they can't hear each other. That's the problem. We've got to set aside differences and have a conversation. I think what we've all kind of said from the very beginning is it starts at the personal level, not the state and local level. It's at the personal level. If you're walking through a grocery store and someone wants to have a conversation with you, please do me a favor. Have a civil conversation with them. Talk about it. how you can relate to them. Hey, we all have kids. We all go to Walmart. We've all been in a situation. We're all lucky to be able to walk out of our Walmart with our kids alive. But what if that situation happens? Wouldn't you like to understand that there's a way that we can save 20 lives? You have to be able to come in a nice way that's not going to insult people. So that's just where I'm at. I'm so frustrated from everything. Clover knows how frustrated I've been the last couple of weeks, and it's just I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And a lot of it is self-imposed. Let's be honest. We are just as guilty as the other side. And before
absolutely
down in flames, we all have to take a step back and say, what can we do to make our lives better? And it's not just the gun lives, people. It's our lives, human beings, having the community out there, your local community, your church, your ball team, your kid's school, whatever it is. Like Clover said, we have to understand that this is part of our life. But if we're making the 2A and the gun our entire lives, that's dangerous as well. I'm not saying you can't do it, because some people can. G can compartmentalize his life and he can handle it. But most of us mortals are not able to compartmentalize everything in our lives and make it about this. I can't do it. That's why I get so stressed out. And I'm sorry for kind of rambling, but we're going to start kind of closing up. So I want to bring anybody in who wants to kind of convey their thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to finish up. I want to finish up on what you said there. And I mean, there's a reasoning for it. You're not, you're living your life with other aspects involved, because that is the pinnacle of happiness, right? You get enjoyment out of all of those different things. They fulfill your life. But here's the plus side to that when we're talking about the Second Amendment and talking with anti-gun people on the fence, FUDs, if you will, whatever you're talking about, is guess what? If you're living a full and productive life with many hobbies and family and friends and all of this other stuff, you have more experiences to relate to that person on a personal level to then interject that Second Amendment argument. And if all you're doing is living the Second Amendment, you're speaking Greek to them.
Yep. 100%. So let's kind of go through the room real quick. We could probably talk for 4 hours, and Kerry, we're going to probably have another discussion simply on some legislation. That needs to happen, and I don't want to cut it off right now because it would do it justice right now.
Yeah.
So let's have another discussion. We can come back next week if you want and talk about legislation.
But I'll give you just the gist of it. Is essentially it's an open checkbook is what it is. There's no, I'll just give you a super brief, but I think it's important that we do. And I think having Michael back, if you're available, and Clover, I think I'd like to see this group back together again with this conversation at some point soon, because this is quickly, y'all, this TAPS Act is what has already been passed by House. And when you're seeing all of the liberals talk about, we already have legislation on the table that we're trying to get passed, and they're calling Mitch McConnell out for that. This is what it is that they're talking about. But this is literally, there's nothing in this. I just read it all, and I've got a bunch of notes. We'll go over those next time, and we'll get into details. That'll give me more time to pick it apart too. But like I'm not excited about that, right? How sick is that? But it's essentially vague. All the TAPS Act is setting up the structure of an environment to create whatever it is that they want to. But it's literally giving them carte blanche. It's essentially the Patriot Act. With a starting budget of $100 million is what this is. And there's no criteria in there. So what this is we're going to pass this. They're going to tell everybody we've got a victory for gun control, right? Or sensible gun, whatever they want to use the language. But there's nothing in here. There is nothing in that has anything to do with any of it, but literally setting up the organization. And again, to paraphrase, allowing way too much liberty. So the TAPS Act isn't about the Second Amendment, it's the Fourth. I'll leave it at that. And then we'll come back to that, because that's really the bigger concern with all of this. And we'll come back to that again in another, I suggest all of y'all come back for that one. It'll be a good one.
Yeah. And as I said before, is we're talking, it's not the Second Amendment that's going to be included. It's going to be the First, the Fourth, the Fifth. There's going to be the whole gamut could be run, because
The
you start
10th.
Yeah, I mean, you're
States' rights.
about freedom as we know it could look. I mean, they're gonna try to change what freedom is. That's basically what we come down to. So yeah, I would love to have. We can do it next week if you guys want to. I do really believe that this is going to be an awesome discussion. But it's been a great discussion tonight, and it still is. But I understand that, you know, you can only talk so much about this before people start losing interest, and I get that. The people in this room, we can talk about it for hours and hours and hours. Unfortunately, others can't. So what I want to do is, before we start going down rabbit holes and all of that, I do want to cut it off here. We can have part 2 next week. I'm all for it. We can continue this part series if we wanted to.
Yeah, I think we should.
Needed. This conversation is needed. So I want to start with Kerry and say, Kerry, for people that are looking to find more about you and We the Female and all of that, tell people where they can find you and all of that stuff.
So if you want the unfiltered Kerry, that's Stilettos and Shotguns on social media, all forums.
I've never seen the filtered part of it.
I've been really good tonight. Thank you very much. I'm gonna get a lot of DMs from, oh my gosh, she wasn't an asshole. So it happens. I know when to put on my pretty panties. Come on, guys. But if you don't want those and you want to see me calling out legislators and the rest of the bullshit, that's Stilettos and Shotguns. It is kind of funny because I don't care. But if you want to know what my organization does, we teach situational awareness and personal security to women. Essentially, my focus and my vision is teaching women how not to need a weapon to begin with, because your biggest weapon is not needing it. And that's wethefemale.net is where you can find my website and you can donate. We are a 501c3. We the Female on Facebook, We the Female _official on the gram, and then at Pagan Patriot KJS on Twitter. Although that's like the Wild West. That's like a dumpster fire in the Wild West in the middle of the something. I'm kind of new to that one, but yeah. So that's where you can find me. And thanks. I'm glad you had me on. This was a great conversation.
It was, and it's something that I think that, I mean, like I said, we've all, within our own time, we've all had this conversation with each other before, and it's nice to have different personalities, different places where they're coming from and all that, because none of us are right. None of us are wrong. We just had to find that common ground that we could all agree on certain things. That's what the whole conversation's about. Yeah. Mike, I want to bring you in, and thanks always for coming, bro. And I mean, I can't speak enough about what this guy does. And if you guys haven't checked out Walk the Talk America, this guy, I'm going to give you a little background. This guy sold his company. You guys have heard of Eagle Imports, Bursa, all these. He sold his company to focus on Walk the Talk America. That people don't understand what that takes. And I'm sure he's a lot busier now than he was back then. But please, I just put the link out there. If you or anyone you know possibly could be suffering from anything that is driving them nuts in their head, please go to WTTA.org. It is a free mental health screening. This is not going to be reported to anybody. You don't have to worry about it. There is help for you. And Mike and Rob and Colion, all these guys are involved with Walk Talk America. Thank you so much for what you're doing, bro. That's sincere. Please tell everybody more about what you're doing and where we can find you.
No, I appreciate that. I think if anyone dives into what Walk the Talk America is doing, they're absolutely going to love it. We are actually getting Mental Health America to fight battles that we couldn't. You see what I'm saying? Like they're bringing me to New Mexico at the end of the month. I'm going to Santa Fe to speak again at one of their conferences. They want to introduce me to some legislators there. This is the stuff that we need. Sometimes we can't win this fight. Maybe it's better to, have allies in a certain area and then let them go. Because I hold Mental Health America's feet to the fire. Every time I see something that's bullshit that goes against everything that Debbie Plotnick, the vice president of Mental Health America, has told me, I bring it to her attention and I tell on people. I'm like,
she's a trip.
Yeah. So for me, like that's the most important thing. It's called get something done instead of bitch about it. I feel like that's what we're doing. I'm excited for the future. As much as I'm irritated right now, I'm happy that people are using the word mental health, and finally some of the people in the firearms industry are waking up. Everybody here has been behind me since day one, or at least for when they found out about what we do. So I appreciate that from you guys. Walk the Talk US, at Walk the Talk US on social media. That tells a 1 year story. A 1 year story right there in front of you. You can kind of just pick and cherry pick little articles and things like that we posted. But that's where you can find me. So,
yeah, thanks, bro. Like I said, I do want to give a quick shout out to some friends of ours that are out in the chat that I don't know if Sarah's still here or not, but Sarah and all the people over at holdmyguns.org are going to put their thing out there as well. We're doing
another amazing organization that's doing some great stuff.
Holdmyguns.org and go check out them, Sarah, and all they're awesome people. I had probably a 2.5 hour discussion with Sarah, and we're texting back and forth today as well. So a lot of cool things going down, and I agree with you, Mike. I'm glad that our culture, our industry, our community is. It sounds like to me, and you and I talked a year ago when it was just first started, and you said that your goal is to strip the scarlet letter off of people with mental health. I honestly, God, I think that letter is being stripped off. I know that you want a lot more, but it's being ripped off as we speak. So, and a lot of that goes to you and all that. So thanks again, bro. I want to bring G in real quick, and G, you've been around, you've seen a lot of stuff. Are we just completely overreacting? You know, are we just crazy to talk about all this stuff, or what?
We have to, right? So I think I was going to wrap it up that keep in mind that the other side only brings this stuff up when they can, right? Because they exploit the tragedy, go for emotions and all that. And that's because their goal is to have distrust. They'd want us to distrust each other. I think Second Amendment all comes down to trusting each other and trusting each other with capability to do harm. And no matter what, they can't. They desperately have to distract us from the fact that every single day for as long as this country's been alive, almost everybody's had guns, and we're all peaceful with that. They need to change that narrative. The only time they can do it is like this, when they can exploit. So these are engineered, and it can be frustrating. Like I said, this is not the first time, and it's not the last time. Let's be realistic that we'll have to deal with this as a community. And if we look at it over time, I think we are doing better as a community with this communication channels that we have and awareness. And man, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. I disagree with Clover. I think that there's all kinds of reasons to be pro 2A and to keep a 2A focus. I think it's actually necessary. But as shooters, right, we all start somewhere as a technology. We all started with black powder. We evolved into semi-automatic mechanisms. There's bipods, there's optics, there's things that become available, target systems, training systems, military training gets disseminated out to the civilian world. There's so many things that we as shooters can be involved in and absorb and incorporate, and then it's just a way of life. Boar snakes, one time they were unknown, and now they're just a thing at the gun shop, right? So activism and awareness and conversations, it can either be part of your experience as a shooter, or it can be one of the things that when you think back of what it was like when we could shoot, that you didn't do. So you can either participate in this kind of stuff or not. But I suggest one way to look at it is just another aspect of shooting is activism, awareness. And because the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, we just need to incorporate it like mowing the lawn, or I just got done combing the hair of my big long-haired dog. It's just something I wish I didn't have to comb her hair, but I got to brush all that hair out of there. It's just one of the things I deal with because I got an awesome dog. So we have an awesome set of rights. We live in an awesome country. There's people that are evil and are unaware that want to remove our rights. And I think that we need to just focus on the fact that that's just another element of our obligation or self-responsibility as a citizen. I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic, bro. Yeah, thanks for coming on, and you can always count on G for a mic drop. And yes, Clover, you get to follow that. So what you got going on? Why don't you tell people any closing comments and where they can find you?
I'm not following that. I'm just going to self-promote and move on. That's all I'm going to do. So yeah, I'll pimp out the FUD Life project. I'll say go over to clovertac.com/FUD Life, and life has a Y, not an I. So it's FUDDLYFE. And in
Ooh,
there,
that's some thug stuff going on there, Clover. That's
yeah,
nice.
you'll kind of understand the project with that, and hopefully that gives some education as to where the actual word originated from and original meaning. And if you're one of these that wants to tout the original meaning of the Constitution, then by God, you need to understand the original meaning of FUD and apply it correctly. So check it out, CloverTac.com.
He's serious about this. He's passionate about this.
I am. It's ridiculous. You know where I stand on the whole FUD thing.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you.
But
I
yeah,
hate the word
CloverTac.com.
FUD anyway, so it's all good.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. It was a great show. It was great talking with everybody.
It was a fantastic conversation.
Well, we're
I mean,
gonna.
I'm getting DMs and text messages coming in talking about it. Like this was like people loving this conversation.
Real quick, could I say one last thing? Because I wanted to crowbar this in and I screwed up. I see a lot of people right now confused online, people messaging me, people saying, how can someone go into a bar or in a Walmart and shoot a bunch of people and that not be mental health? I want people to remember that mental health is not impulse control. It's not anger management. It's not being beat as a kid. Okay. It's not variables that can cause someone to snap. Mental health diagnosis has certain diagnosis, but if you have horrible impulse control, if you have anger management, and then you throw on substance abuse, there are so many different things that you could put into somebody. That's why there's no future predictor of violence. There's no Minority Report movie. That's reality. So, and I'm sure I still just left a lot of people confused, but that's okay. You can message me privately and we can continue the conversation. But I need people to understand that because I see people trying to figure it out, because I think that's good. I think it's good when you say, well, how can someone walking into a Walmart and just taking innocent lives? How can that not be mental health? But you have to understand why it's not always that. And so I just need people to understand that's why we don't do that. That's why we don't just jump to, oh, it's mental health. That's why right now Trump is wrong with how he's approaching his language, and on CNN too. I see them do it as well. So, thank you. Thanks for tonight, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. G, you had something you want to touch on real quick?
Yeah, just thanks, Mike, for being a resistance to that. Just like shrug it off as mental health garbage. Anyway, I was just going to say, one thing, we've been patting ourselves on the back because we had such a great show or whatever, and we did, but we aren't perfect and we didn't address everything. I think something that I'm just learning about is it Red Summer? Does everybody know about Red Summer? 1919. We're in the 100th anniversary of that.
Yeah.
42 something race riots in this country. So when we talk about 1776, if KD was here, he could be more eloquent about it. But there's a whole group of people that are getting woke, and we need to be aware of that. And if you're interested, go search the history out. It's easier than ever on the internet. But there's a lot of stuff we didn't touch on today. And when they want to talk about removing access or removing rights, let's talk about the consequences of that. And they want to suggest the consequences are all theoretical or not applicable because they're in countries that are third world or have different circumstances. Well, we can talk about 100 years ago today. We can talk about even more recent. We can talk about the Battle of Athens, the anniversary on the 1st of the month. But there's lots of stuff that we can talk about in our country's history where the right to own firearms, the right to protect yourself, your community, has been tested and has allowed us to become where we are today. And these same people that are going to fight to remove rights are standing in an environment built with those rights. It couldn't exist without those rights. And those are the kind of topics we didn't get to talk about today, but I think still valid arguments to shut up people who are just shouting rhetoric and to wake people up who simply are just not aware.
Dan, two mic drops and damn. No, G, you're absolutely right. And I think that one thing that we have to understand is sometimes the best weapon is compassion. Let's be honest. Yeah. Compassion and empathy are something that are critical to understanding humans. And for anyone out there that has lost someone, I feel for you. I think that we can all sit there and say we all pray for the families that are involved with these incidents over the weekend. And I wish we could tell you this, but we're all giving you a hug. And you may not agree with what we believe politically. You may not agree with how we live our lives and some of the tools that we choose to defend ourselves with. But I think we can all agree that love is stronger than hate. If we allow it to be, love is stronger than hate. And if we all love each other to a human core, maybe we can get past our differences and our philosophical differences and how we choose to live our lives. Because I think when it comes down to is, I'm not trying to be kumbaya, but sometimes a hug means more than anything else. So thank you so much, guys, for listening. Stay tuned for next week. I think we're going to continue this for as long as we need to, because this is the conversation that needs to be had. And don't wait to watch this conversation. Start your own conversations tomorrow in your hometown. Make sure that we're listening to people. Make sure we respect people. And by God, make sure that we understand that we're all Americans. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please leave some comments or questions if you have them. We'll address them next week. Semper Fi.